And welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Holly Jolly High-Low Sports Podcast. We appreciate y'all for spending some time on this Christmas holiday, to hang out with us and talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of sports between the presents, the dinner, and all the festivities. It is DJ, joined as always by my co-host Santa Claus Kelsey. Kelsey, it's a pleasure to have you join us today for this wonderful Holly Jolly day.
Yeah, I just got off the sleigh. Just had a good time. It's a great. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do all that. I'm not Santa Claus. I'm not that athletic. If you've seen Red One yet, you know that Santa Claus is jacked, and that is not me. So no, honestly, this is going to be a fun episode, special episode. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. If you celebrate Christmas, if you don't, happy holidays. I hope you guys are all having a good time and enjoying the days off with your family if you're in the U.S. And if you're not, well, hopefully enjoy Boxing Day in Canada.
Hey, you know what? That can't complain about that either. And whatever you celebrate, hopefully you're having a wonderful time as well. And since it is the holidays, it is Christmas time, we're not going to do our normal kind of recap, what's going on in the world of sports, all of that. We're not going to talk about the college football first round, which people have been complaining about for no reason. We're going to do something. We're going to go back to the roots a little bit. We're going to have a little bit of fun. We're talking basketball, and we're doing a ranking, but not just any ranking, kind of an OG ranking. We haven't done it in 4 or so years. We're going to look at the top 10 NBA players of all time. From 10 to 1, we're each going to give our list with a surprise at the very end as well. This is a fun topic because it could be controversial from all angles depending on who you talk to. It is very subjective. Our only rules for this one, to try and keep it as locked in, is we are not including anything off the court, basically. So whether basically just nothing off the court, really, barring like major arrests, but nobody in this is like really in that conversation necessarily. This isn't football where they have that issue more often. And we're basically we're exclusive keeping into basketball, not like La GM, nothing like that. We're not including that in any of the rankings. Just pure between the quote unquote lines on the 94 feet hardwood.
Now, I'm going to ask this question because I think it does matter. We are picking the all-time best NBA players or best basketball players in the NBA.
We're just going to do top 10 NBA players of all time. We're just going to keep it simple. We're
sure.
not going to get into the goofy stuff. We're not going to go include high school and everything like that.
No. I know. I'm just specific. I'll explain why I asked that question much later on in the episode. But yeah, there's a reason I asked it that exact way.
It's because you like to bend the rules, just like last time we did, and it was your top 11.
No. This has zero things to do with the rules. It's just more clarification.
So that you can bend the rules. We get it. It's okay. We understand. Rules only apply partially. Stockton and Malone count as number 7 on your list. I get it, but
not this year. Not this year. We have the rule about no arrests, or no allegations of arrests.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess that's how we had to change the rule bending. But we're gonna go ahead and go from 10 to 6, and then 10 to 6, and then we're gonna go back and forth for the final 5, since there'll be a little bit of similarities there, I'd imagine. Maybe a little differences. We'll have to wait and see. Since I read the comments in the DMs, everyone says we have the same list. I don't think it'll be the same this time. But
we have. I mean, okay. Let's be fair though. Like in these all-time rankings, can you get away with not having 5, 6 of the same players? No. I mean, there's some relative similarities that's always going to be in a list. I hate it because we always do end up somewhere in the same realm of possibility of each other, and it's frustrating because I always want to be the smartass and have a great pick, but I don't always get away with that. So hopefully you don't beat me to the clever pick this time.
Well, speaking of it, we're going to start right out with my pick out of the gate, which some might be considered a clever pick, some might not. We're going to go with number 10 on DJ's list. We're going with Stephen Chef Curry, Golden State point guard, currently still playing as well. Everyone knows about his stature, the greatest shooter of all time, statistically, most threes. Career 3-point average of 42% still, especially at the volume of which he shoots them, and shooting them on the move, which is ridiculous. He's led the NBA in free throw percentage multiple times. Multiple-time MVP, first unanimous if I'm remembering correctly as well. 1-time Finals MVP, 4-time NBA Finals champion. Basically, for worse and for worse, changed how basketball is played today, unfortunately. However, all credentials in there, everything else aside, he's been in the league for 16 years. Once the ankles kind of got wrapped up, for lack of better terms, he's been sensational. He's been dominant. One of the best players in the game, despite obviously he doesn't play the best defense, but he's not the worst at defense either. We've had much worse people on these lists defensively. Gets players involved, does He's just outstanding. Steph Curry, I think, is earned, especially with that 2021 title, I believe it was when they beat the Celtics. Maybe it's 22 when they beat the Celtics, and he went into the Garden and started talking trash to the Celtics fans, who are known for being cordial and respectful and nice.
Oh,
Just because
totally.
Draymond Green was completely rattled and shook and bullied and all but crying in the parking lot over it, which he for lack of better terms, admitted. Steph Curry put that on his back and carried them to that championship. So for me, Steph Curry cracks the spot at number 10. But if we do this again next year, that might change. It's a very it's a saloon door, like those ones where they kick it open in the old westerns. That's kind of what this 8 through 14 spots are. There's a lot of potential movement in there.
Yeah, I respect it. Obviously, I love Steph. Big fan. Once he learned to play with his hips, not his ankles, he got a lot better. I say that, and I'm not kidding. That was literally what his trainer told him. They or told the media that's what they changed when he stopped getting hurt. So yeah, no, I love Steph there. We'll see if he made my list though.
The last thing I will add to him as well is on, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm doing quick math here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the last 10 or so seasons, he's averaged more 3-point attempts than 2-point attempts, which is just how dynamic. Then he's not a corner 3-point shooter. He is your primary ball handler. And then he brings the ball up the court, flies around off the screens, does all that stuff. Just insane how he has changed the game in his own ways, being a dominant scoring ball handler while also being an elite shooter, while not also dribbling the air out of the ball like James Harden. So a very unique skill set in its own that good luck anybody else for actually replicating that besides Caitlin Clark in the WNBA, but that's a whole different conversation. But we'll go on to number 9 now. We're going to go a little bit further in the past. We're going to go with Kelsey's 13th favorite player of all time, somewhere in there. We're going to go with Larry Bird. Larry Legend himself for the Boston Celtics. I think you could make a case for him being a lot higher. The only reason I don't have him higher is just because it was such a short career. That prime was so good. It was just so short. 13 total years, and we know those last couple, when his back was out, it wasn't quite the same, but multiple times led the NBA minutes. Rookie of the year, 3-time MVP, 3 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. And then including, if I'm doing my math here correctly, 4, 7, 9 times he finished in the top 3. First team All NBA the first 9 of years of his career. Defensive Player of the Year finished in the Defensive Player of the Year rankings multiple times. Career averages of 24, 10, and 6, and that includes those last few years when he didn't have a spine that fully functioned. He's absolutely incredible. Best trash talker in the history of the NBA. I think you can make a strong case for, arguably. Definitely one of them. When you
I'll say top 5 trash talker of all time. Yes.
Especially the way he would do it too. Walk in there like, who's getting second place? Then goes and gets first place. Or I'm going to shoot right here and shoots it right there. 50% from the field, 38% from 3 before it was really a thing, 88% from the free throw line. Wasn't the best athlete, obviously, still double-digit rebounds. Still played pretty good defense, not Scottie Pippen locking people down, but the steals, the patrolling, the blocks, that sort of thing too. Led the NBA minutes multiple times, so before the back went out, he was incredibly durable. Efficiency through the roof, and we already know the rivalry with Magic Johnson, 3-time champion, I think 1-time finals MVP. Absolutely sensational. So we got Larry Bird at number 9. You could make a strong case for him being higher, and I would not argue it necessarily. I'm mostly holding not quite as much longevity, and that team was so well rounded to where he only actually had one of those finals MVPs, if I'm not mistaken, compared to because of how everybody's able to cook. So we got Larry Bird at a number 9. You could make a case for higher, but I'm going to stick him at number 9 because I think 8 through 10, it's going to be hard to get past those guys.
I'm intrigued to see where the rest of your list goes because I believe when we last did this list, Larry Legend was 5, 6, or 7 on your list. And here he is at number 9. So I'm intrigued to see what's moved ahead of him.
I correct that too. He's a 2 times finals MVP. I got one of those years mixed up. So it was because it was the middle year that they won it that got me, or the first year that they won it, he didn't get it, but in 84 and 86, he did get it. So I got a little backed up, but that's still, we're going to keep him there because number 8 on the list is also a 2 times finals MVP and a 5-time finals champion. We all know exactly who that is just from that definition alone. We got Kobe Bryant, one of the best 2 guards of all time, Lakers legend, arguably the greatest Laker of all time, considering his entire career was spent there as well. 25 points per game averages, 5 and 5, 45% from the field, 33% from 3, a little bit rough there, obviously, but played all 82 games multiple time leading scorer in the league for points. MVP, only 1-time MVP, which I think we could all agree how. Probably should have at least a couple more on there as well. Finished in the
Wow.
top 5 more than almost a dozen times in his career as well. Defense defensive player of the year rankings in the conversation several times. First team all NBA, I think 9 times, maybe 10, even more. I can't do math very well, but point is absolutely awesome. All-Star game, the All-Star game is basically Kobe Bryant's game. Like they had if I'm not mistaken, they had the trophy named after him as well.
Yeah.
He's been
The
absolutely
Kobe Bryant MVP trophy.
exactly. The one thing he gets knocked on is incredibly high volume shots, not always the most efficient. However, when the game's on the line, how many more people do you want with the ball in their hands? Not too many necessarily when it comes to making the shot, at least. Defensively, too, which I kind of mentioned loosely, incredible defender. He was doing that when he was Froby. Before he was the elite, he was able to, for 19 years old, he was chasing people all the way across the court, defending him. High flying dunker, mid range game. Incredible player. His is what the one on this list where I think the stats almost don't do it justice compared to the eye test. His accolades are obviously there with all these other guys. I just went through some of them. Some of the other guys like Steph stats I went through. I could do some of those with Kobe. Like averaged 35 points per game in 2005 with Smush Parker as his point guard. Like we all know about that team that went to the playoffs. His is the ultimate. If you know, you know. Like no numbers are going to do as much justice of how good he actually was, in my opinion. But we got Kobe at number 8.
Ouch. I mean, I respect the number comparison there, like number 8 getting it at sitting at number 8, but wow, that's a spot for him for sure.
We
I'm
got some
intrigued.
dudes
I'm
ahead of
intrigued
him.
what's ahead of you. What's ahead now? Because now I'm concerned about the rest of your list. Now I can't lie.
Well, every single player on this list is either a Hall of Famer or a to be Hall of Famer. So there is that. Like it's not like I'm shortchanging him necessarily here. I mean, I'm not putting. There's nobody up here that has a necessarily worse resume than him when you look at it. So next up, though, someone who he knows very well, teammate for a few of those championships. We got the Big Diesel, Shaquille O'Neal, for that first 12 years or so of his career. If that we just went off of that, my lord, he might be much higher. He played for 19 years, about 10, 11 of those, we'd say he was absolutely dominant, especially those Laker years when he was just an absolute force in the middle. Led the NBA in field goal percentage 10 times in 19 years, which is just absolutely insane. Multiple time scoring champion, multiple time MVP. Like the accolades speak for themselves. His career numbers now sit at 24-11 with 58% from the field, and that includes his ghost years in Boston, Cleveland, Phoenix, where he wasn't even like he was the big cactus, the big arrow. He was not Shactus, or he was Shactus. He wasn't the big Aristotle. He wasn't the Diesel. He was just a cactus. But all that being said, the most dominant big man in the modern era that's very well, I feel like I'm not going to say unanimous, but pretty well accepted for the most part. Just what he did basically up until 2005 or 6, like that second year with the Heat. Every year before that, too, multiple time in the Defensive Player of the Year category. First team All NBA, basically from 1992 to 2006, like which is just insane to think about. Like 14-time his first 14 years first team All NBA, right out of the gate as a rookie, top 7 in MVP as a rookie as well, and then for those during that exact same time frame, he was in the MVP conversation for 11 of those years. Absolutely sensational career. We all know about the knock on the free throws. We all know that like that's the running joke. Also led the league in blocks multiple times, so he did,
Mhm.
especially Phil Jackson challenging him defensively to get on it. So didn't lead the league in blocks, sorry, but had multiple seasons of like three high 2.5 blocks, etc. 29 points per game multiple times. Just that sensational play. We all know Shaq. I can go over his accolades all we want, but we got Shaq sitting at number 7, just ahead of former teammate Kobe Bryant.
I respect that pick. I don't know how I feel about Shaq being in front of Kobe, but I respect the pick.
6 and one and half a dozen the other. I feel like them not being right next to each other almost feels sacrilegious at this point. But I get it if someone wants to move them up or down, which it was inevitable to happen. Maybe I'm just looking for a little poetry in this. But if you want to flip them, I wouldn't argue either. Shaq getting the 3 Finals MVPs and 4 titles. Kobe at the 2 Finals MVPs, 5 titles. Can crisscross applesauce either way. But for the last of my first 6 before we get to Kelsey, we're sticking with the big men, and we're going with the one big man that Shaq ever said actually gave him problems. We're going with Hakeem Olajuwon, former center for the Rockets. Career averages of 22, 11, and 2, 50% from the field. I think what the downside with him is he always gets remembered as just the guy who won the titles when Michael Jordan was on hiatus. They forget that he was actually that dude, like they forget he was cooking throughout that time too. Multiple times led the league in rebounds as well with 13.5, 14. In a similar vein too, he was in that MVP conversation from when he was drafted in 84 all the way up until basically 1996, give or take. Always in that MVP conversation, two-time defensive player of the year, two times finals winner, two-time finals MVP, 26, basically up until about 97, 98 is when he was averaging, giving you 24 points per game, give or take. Obviously, with a lot of these guys, you see it as they get older, that takes down their career averages. So if you look at them, take out those last couple of years, you get a better idea of kind of where they stood. The one thing he didn't have the issue with was free throws, regularly 75% or higher, double-digit rebounds most of his career, as I mentioned with the points. Where he stands out and is different is he led the league in blocks, and actually did this time 3 times with 4.6 blocks per game at one point and 4.2 blocks per game. If you think about just how absolutely insane that is, 4 times 82, that's a what load of blocks. Steals. A big man that actually got steals as well is actually the only player, if I'm not mistaken. He might not be anymore, but at one point he was top 10 in blocks and steals. That's how absolutely dynamic he was on the defensive end. And we haven't even used the words the dream shake yet, which is what he was known for. With 4 moves, then 4 counter moves to each move. He had 20 different moves for you on the block. He was arguably the best, a top 2 offensive center of all time, with somebody else we'll talk about probably later, I'm sure. And arguably a top 2 defensive center of all time, depending on if you want to include the Bill Russells, Dikembe Mutombos in there as well. But he might be the best combination of offensive and defensive center, with all of the finesse, the strength, the power, the athleticism. And we talk about Shaq, the most dominant. Hakeem was the only one that truly gave Shaq had his, obviously. No one gives Shaq the business. I'm not going to say that. That's a little outlandish. But in that golden age of 90 centers, it was Hakeem Olajuwon as the centers who stood out for basically until Shaq went to the Lakers and Hakeem started to come off. So we're going to get Hakeem slightly above Shaq just for a few of those things like the free throws and just a slight nudge above him.
That's fair. I respect the Hakeem love. We've talked about this many times. You always rank Hakeem higher than I do, and that's just down to my love of the big guy center in Shaq more so than Hakeem. But honestly, I putting those two next to each other, I respect that a lot. I get it. I don't hate your first 5. I will say there's a couple surprising spots in there. I'm intrigued now because there's 5 spots to fill, and I'm really curious what 5 you're going with in that top 5. So I don't know. It's interesting to see what you have ranked so far.
Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of names to fit into a very short list. So some people are going to get left off, some are going to get propelled in there, some are going to be just organized differently. But that's what we have for my tops. For my top 5, Kelsey, we'll let you go and lead the way with your 10 through 6 spots.
Yeah, so we'll start with the all-time winningest player in NBA history as far as championships go, Bill Russell. That's my number 10. As you mentioned, one of the best defensive centers to ever play the game. Yeah, I've constantly made the joke he played with a bunch of plumbers and pipe fitters and mail letter carriers. But you know what? Can't fault a guy for being the best player in his era. And I think being the best player in an era gets you some sort of conversation in the top 10 in my eyes. And that's where Bill Russell goes in. So I have not a lot to say about it. I mean, guy finished 22 boards per game and 4 assists per game. As a big guy, that's at that time 22 boards is insane stat line. So yeah, just bigger, taller, faster, stronger than everybody else around him, and there's some credence to be held to that. I mean, I got to give credit where credit is due. As much as I love to bash on his career, you know what? I'll give it the respect. So Bill Russell is going to come in at my number 10.
It's funny when you joked about like all the plumbers and mail carriers stuff he played with. There was 13 good NBA players in the league at that time that stand the test of time, and 8 of them were on his team with him and are in the Hall of Fame right now. It's like,
yeah,
well, gosh, damn. But the consummate winner when it comes to championships, like you can't overlook that for sure. So he's
if we were including coaching wins as well or front office wins, that would be a whole nother conversation where this guy gets even further ahead. But yeah, no, just player wins. I mean, it's 11. That's insane.
Absolutely, just a class of its own that will definitely never be emulated. That's for sure. I don't think it's even possible at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So next up, I think this is the center you were referencing when you talked to Keem as possibly the best all-time scoring center ever. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He is my number 9, and I'm going to explain this very simply. For the same reasons you just mentioned about Bill Russell, where he had 8 Hall of Famers on his team. Showtime Lakers were led by Kareem and Magic and a whole bunch more Hall of Famers. There are Hall of Famers that probably shouldn't be Hall of Famers that were members of the Showtime Lakers. So it's hard to look at that and think that some of the other guys that I have ahead of him didn't do more with less, because this is before the era of distribution of talent, or supposed distribution of talent. And so Kareem, a lot of his stats for me, I don't want to discount him by any means, because again, probably one of the all-time best centers of all, in a lot of people's eyes. I think everybody considers him a top 3 center. For me, he's not number 1 though. I just don't think he's number 1 overall as a center. I look at him as the 3rd best center of all time, best scoring center, but the 3rd best center of all time. So yeah, that's why I have him lower than the 2 centers you mentioned. But yeah, that's. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for putting Kareem this low, but you know what? So be it. It is what it is, man. At the end of his career, he kind of fell off quickly with those knees, but he was there. He was still winning championships. So I'm not going to fault the guy for having to do that. He played 2 careers with 2 different names and dominated in both of them. So yeah, all credit to him for getting there, but he's my number 9 on my list.
I'll keep my answer short and sweet. I'll add on to, he also did play with Oscar Robertson, so another Hall of Famer you could throw in there as well too from his time with the Bucks. So the list does keep on going. And the one thing I'll add is I have him in a completely different spot than you, but I will leave that at that because we'll circle back to this later. But interesting, we're starting off a little bit different out of the gate. So those who always give us trash, well, you know what? We're different right out of the gate. So we're welcome, everybody.
Don't worry, the next 3 will be in the same vein.
Mm-hmm.
Number 8 on my list, sticking in the center role, and I'm going with your number 6, Hakeem. And again, I'll just keep this short and sweet. I agree with everything you said as far as how good he was defensively, how good he was in the post. Probably the best all-around center we've ever seen. But again, I don't think he was long-term dominant enough to be the number 1 center. And that feels like I'm sliding him a little bit here. But compared to my top center, it feels like his era of domination, as you rightly mentioned, everybody remembers him for the 2 years that wasn't Jordan. And I don't agree with that theory, but I also think that's a big part of where I rank players is you kind of have to have a little bit of credit and street cred in this. And so Hakeem is just, he's the 2nd best center, 8th guy on my top 10 all-time list when we're talking about over 1,000 plus players to ever play in the NBA. And, hopefully I'm not sliding him too much. But I will say I don't think his record of blocks is ever going to get touched. 3,830 all-time blocks. I don't think that ever gets touched.
Not by somebody who has the offensive game that he does, too. I highly doubt somebody with that kind of game.
Not anybody that can average 10 points a game.
Exactly. And meanwhile, he's giving you like 24 on top of it. And we'll throw into it, you can make the case he might be the best foreign-born player of all time as well, but depending on how our lists shake out. So that's something to note as well. So I'll let you go and keep going.
I have a better foreign-born player on my list.
Very interesting. You're one of the best then.
Yeah, one of the probably number 2. Looks like I think number 2 on the list. Actually, number 3 on the list, foreign-born. Just kidding. All right, number 7. You mentioned him. Short career as far as dominant career, but one of the most dominant. We remember him as one part of the top duo through the late 80s, early 90s era of basketball. Larry Bird. I shouldn't say late 80s. The 80s and early 90s before the MJ era, basically. And that's Larry Bird. I had Bird at 7. As you said, dude would just walk into a gym, tell people where he's going to go and dribble and exactly what move and in exactly what order and how he was going to shoot and exactly how many rotations will be on the ball as he shoots it. Like that's just how cocky he was. He knew his game inside and out and upside down. So he knew what he could do. He knew what you could do from just what you can do by the rules. And that was enough that the guy was one of the most effective offensive players to ever play. And as you mentioned, his defense was no slouch. Now, again, not Scottie Pippen levels defense, not even Isaiah Thomas. No, just kidding. He's better than Isaiah Thomas defensively, but not Magic defensively. And I think that's the difference. I think Bird was was better offensively than Magic was, but I think Magic all around was better than Bird, including on defense. Maybe splitting hairs on that, but that's why I have Bird here at 7. Is he's quality offense top to bottom. But again, all these guys that played for the Celtics, I have a little bit less love, if you will, for trying to put them a little higher than everybody else, just because they always play with superstars.
So you never really see the Celtics as a one-man team or a two-man duo team. It's always a loaded squad. It feels like when they're at their best. Even right now, Jason Tatum is awesome, but that is the best. That team is like 13 deep. It's absolutely ridiculous. Celtics, they can't keep getting away with it, yet they keep getting away with it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm gonna move straight to my number 6, the all-time best center in my eyes, Shaq Diesel, Superman himself. DJ Shaq, DJ, whatever his
Big
DJ
Aristotle.
name is. Yeah, he has 6 different DJ names. He's a police officer / everything else / whatever he wants to be. He also gets pushed into the Christmas tree by Kenny every holiday season. So, you know what? He does get dominated by somebody, but it was never anybody on the basketball court. That's for sure. The dude was as dominant as he got on the post, and I think that's why I have him up here. And I think his career was extended by playing with Kobe, and then he was able to extend that tenure beyond that. I think that Suns move after the Lakers is really what killed him. I think that high pace offense they were running was just not for him. And obviously everybody talks about if he had the Kobe conversation where when he goes to the Lakers, if he just tried to stay in shape, he would be a much better player. I agree with that. I don't think there's any doubt. But the dude is still a top center, even with those complaints. He could have been an all-time top 3 player if he did that, but instead he's just the best center to have ever played the game and probably the last best bully ball center to play in the NBA. And I think that's an important stat to hold, important kind of notation is he was that piece that evolved with the centers throughout the last part of his career. As we saw, he went to a very bit part player down the stretch as he played with the Celtics there at the end. Even the Heat was not necessarily the same level of Shaq. He was still good with the Heat, but he wasn't that guy anymore. So yeah, it's with Shaq, it's a guy that I think he's the best center. So that's for me why I have him at number 6. A little bit higher than you have, Shaq. You have Shaq at 7. I have Shaq at 6. But you know what? We flip flopped our center picks. I pushed Hakeem down a little bit lower, but 3 centers in my first 5. So yeah, there you go.
Hey, you know what? Can't complain too. And like we said, we're in agreement. If Shaq was just a little healthier, a little longer, and could have maintained that early dominance, this is maybe a completely different conversation. But
Probably goes up against the toughest franchise though, as he was aging out with the Spurs, or as he's aging out of Lakers, and that Spurs team is starting to come on with Duncan and Robinson and Manu and Tony Parker gets all involved there. I think that really killed his ability to be dominant because that team was so much more mobile down in the post than he was.
Exactly. And then his time with the Heat, too, like you mentioned, wasn't quite the same, but he was still able to sneak in that championship with Dwayne Wade as well during that finals performance in between. So Shaq Diesel, those who know, they know as well. Like, yeah, still one of the best ever. So now for our top 5, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going back and forth 5-5, 4-4, 3-3, 2-2, 1-1. So we're switching up the order midway through. You mentioned those Spurs teams, which is a great transition to where we're going for me. Number 5, the big fundamental himself, Groundhog Day, Old Man Riverwalk, Tim Duncan. Just unbelievable career that people seem to forget about because his numbers are the epitome of ungaudy. Like they are Old Navy of numbers, averaging 19, 11 for his career, 50% from the field. But that's because of down the stretch when he was basically just like whatever we need to do to win. Like the last 6 or so years when he was averaging 15 and 9, somewhere like that, kind of transitioned to that center role with Popovich. Him, Thiago Splitter, kind of built around Kawhi, Tony Parker as he was starting to blossom even more, etc. They forget Tim Duncan is a different level of dude from his heyday. For those who aren't familiar with the credentials, 15-time All-Star, 15-time All NBA, All Rookie Team Rookie of the Year, 2-time MVP back-to-back years in that 2002, 2003, or 2001, 2002 range as well. So basically right in the middle of the Shaq Lakers eras as well. And on top of that, let's throw in 15-time All Defensive Team, 5-time NBA champ, 3-time Finals MVP, including with David Robinson on that team. When it was the two towers going up against Shaq and Kobe's Lakers, going up against those Pistons teams, That was the team that gave him trouble because of Tim Duncan. David Robinson's a Hall of Fame player, the Admiral, who got over the hump because of Tim Duncan and took over and allowed David Robinson to play alongside him, for lack of a better terms. Not to mention, arguably, as far as power forwards go, the best rim protector in the history of the game. Because he's not, if you don't classify him as a center, you've classified him as a power forward, since he was a power forward that switched to center down at the end of his career, basically. So the best defensive power forward, arguably, of all time. And I think of all the players on this one, he might be the one that I think plays in different eras the best. And I say that because he'd be a center in today's era, probably. He hit that mid range, that bank shot, that kind of goofy little whoop shot that just banked in all the time. Money was mobile enough to like move out with some of the stretch five, stretch fours. Defensively, one of the best rim protectors. Offensively, just get him in the paint and it's over. Very versatile. Just Tim Duncan, I think the downside is he played alongside Kobe and Shaq, who were more notable, more notoriety, more publicized. Rightfully so. Those are awesome guys too. I'm sure we're going to have all three of them on our top 10 list. That being said, Tim Duncan was that dude. And I think so. We're going to give Tim Duncan a little love here, put him at number 5.
Yeah. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off because he's my number 5 too.
Okay, we'll just go right to you then.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just going to rip. I could go into a whole. Forget that. I'm just going to explain. I agree. Everything you said, I agree. I think Tim Duncan is the most consistent technical player to have ever played in the post. And I mean that I'm including centers in that. As much as I just talked about centers, I mean, Tim Duncan as a power forward was as technical as it can get, to the point where he is nicknamed the Big Fundamental. I don't think anybody can say that they are that guy. They are that consistent day in and day out. As you mentioned, at the end of his career, he was just very much, I will sacrifice everything to win, including his knees, which he did many times. And early on in his career, he was that young, I won't say spark plug because he was always on the court, so he didn't really get a chance to leave. But he would, when he'd be in the game, and him and Robinson were able to work off of each other. David Robinson, it was something we've never seen, and we've never even seen anything come close to that again. We've had small iterations here and there of players playing together in the post that sort of worked well, but never that was so smooth. And we always talk about current teams, like especially the Timberwolves last year, just clogging up the paint. You never had to worry about that with the Spurs. And that was part of Duncan's range. And, that's a huge piece of his game. He was that first really spread four that ever made it into the modern era of the game and really was successful with it. Now teams look for that as their 5 now, because that's where the game's gotten to today. As we mentioned, Steph Curry earlier, as changing the game. Well, part of that is like a guy like Duncan is now considered a center and now is a stretch 5 instead of a stretch 4. And let's not forget, he's hit game winners from a 3-point line. So, he could shoot it from even deeper when he needed to. But yeah, no, Tim Duncan, 100% agree with everything you just said. By the way, he was the question mark I had for foreign-born players, because technically born in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, but it is a U.S. territory, so I'm loose and fast with the born in the U.S. thing. But he did play for the U.S. national team. So, yeah, that's where I was torn. So he's up there as well, as far as all that goes, potentially foreign-born players. But yeah, definitely agreeing with Tim Duncan at number 5 for obvious reasons.
Absolutely. All love for the big fundamental on this show, and there will be no slander whatsoever. The
If I could put him higher, I would.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, there will be no slander. My only knock is he looked better without the hair that he currently has now. I think looked better with the cleaner cut than the hair. But he's retired. I want him to live his best life. Keep going to Old Navy. Keep doing your thing. And if you ever see this, you're welcome on the show. Or if you just want to chat, that'd be cool. So it doesn't have to be on the show. Like that.
Anytime. I don't care what you want to talk about. You could talk about metaphysics. We will have a great conversation. I am okay with that.
Undoubtedly. But that's going to now move us up to number 4 on my list. We're going to take a trip back to LA. Things are going to get a little bit magic here. We're going to put Magic Johnson there. 4-time leader in assists, 2-time leaders in steals, 5-time NBA champ, 10-time All-NBA, 3-time Finals MVP, 3-time League MVP, 2-time All-Star Game MVP, 12-time All-Star, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on and on and on. The credentials are endless. The biggest knock on him is we didn't get to see him quite as much as we'd have liked because of the illness as well. We only saw him for about 12 years, then the time off. Then he had that 1 year, 95, 96, where he played a handful of games. Don't even want to really count that necessarily, because it was him trying to come back wasn't quite the same. But heyday Magic, you're a Finals MVP in your rookie year. We are never going to see that again. You stepped in at center and dropped when Kareem was hurt and dropped 40 and 15. Like, just absolutely insane. A 6'9" point guard who is so smooth with the ball. The closest thing I could think of would be Giannis right now, and even that's like light years behind. Because as someone who's that tall and lanky who can dribble and pass. Because at the same time, look what we it's called Showtime because of Magic. The passes, the running the break, the alley oops, the kickouts, feeding Kareem like 50+% from the field for his career too. His numbers 19 and a half, 11 assists, 7 rebounds. Not gaudy by any means as well. Like the numbers from some of the older players aren't going to match some of the newer ones necessarily, but we all know how good he was. I mean, I already went through his credentials as well. It's Magic freaking Johnson, quite arguably the best point guard of all time. Whether you want to split, you could split hairs with like the Steph Curry scoring point guards, the passing point guards. Either way, he's in that conversation for best point guard of all time. Whether you cut it down to just passers or you cut it down to the combo guards, he's in that conversation for everything he could provide across the board, from passing, running the break, defense, as you mentioned, the ability to score in abundance when needed. We just 42 as a center in a game 7, like probably one of the best top 2 or 3 versatile weapons in the history of the game, I would say, offensively.
Yeah. I laughed earlier because I also have Magic at 4.
Oh boy.
So we just can't beat we can't beat the accusations. It looks like I'm sorry. I tried to be cute and funny by putting Duncan at 5 and Magic at 4, but it's not happening, obviously. But no, I agree with everything you said about Magic. He might be the best point guard to play, and if it wasn't for Magic, we wouldn't have a LeBron, we wouldn't have a Giannis, we wouldn't have that. Like we'd still have those players, but they wouldn't be the style of players they are. Like LeBron's point forward seemed revolutionary until you look at Magic and see what he did, and it was legitimately revolutionary to the point that he dragged Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to multiple championships at the end of his career with no knees. Like I think that's the important part here, where Magic, we talk about revolutionary players like Steph and things. Magic revolutionized what it means to be a point guard, and especially to be an impactful scoring point guard at the same time while still distributing and getting your other teammates involved, because he was still that guy. I mean, the year you talk about his rookie year with getting an MVP in the finals, like if Kareem doesn't get hurt, Kareem probably walks away with the finals MVP in that instead. And that's how good of a point guard he was, is he could step up and score 40 and 15 in a crucial game at any point in time, or he could be the guy that sets up the big guy, gets him down the court. And I'll even be, I think he would actually have been a more statistically improved player. I'm not going to say everything else, but statistically improved player if he didn't have somebody who was not necessarily built for the Showtime system like Kareem. If he had a Hakeem to play in his career, if he had that style of a center, that's a much different conversation of how good Magic could really be versus everything. But what he was able to do, it's 100% agree. He's number 4, probably the best point guard to ever play the game.
Imagine him with Orlando Shaq. That
I'd
running and flying all over the place.
Insulting would be the least mean thing I could say about what they would do to other teams.
That's probably the best way to put it. It would be gruesome for everybody involved. But the good news is I can guarantee our number 3 spots are different because you've already listed number 3. At number 3, I have Cap himself, the big fella, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at number 3. 11-time All-Defensive Player, 19-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA, 4-time block champion, surprisingly. Granted, that was all before he joined the Lakers in a different time, but still impressive nonetheless. All-Rookie team, 2-time Finals MVP, 6-time MVP, 2-time NBA MVP, rebound champion, all-time leading scorer until like a year ago, I think, give or take now as well. 20 years and didn't really have a significant fall off year until about 86, give or take. Before that, it was 20 to 30 points up until 1986 when he dropped down to like 17, 14, and then 10 for those last 3 years. Led the league in scoring his second and third year in the league, over 30 points. Led the league in blocks 4 times, as I mentioned. Led the league in rebounding with 17 per game in 75, 76. Led it in field goal percentage at one point as well. I think what separates him too is like when he was with the Lakers, we remember him as him and Magic co-sidekicks. When he was with the Bucks is when he was actually extremely ridiculous. Those early years before he was traded. All the points averaging 30 and 16 one year, 35 and 16 another, 32 and 16. multiple time MVPs. Like I said, 6 regular season MVPs. What's surprising is only the 2 finals MVPs because he had to share it with Magic Johnson, who got them as well, especially when he got hurt that one year. The multiple time MWBA, MBWA, NBA MVP. Jeez, way too many acronyms in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
19-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA player, most of those as a first teamer as well. If we were including high school and college, well, especially college with this, he would be number 1 because of what he did at UCLA. Even taking that out, he's still top 3. You're the all-time leading scorer up until about a year ago. And you were the epitome of long-term high-level success up until somebody else who neither one of us has mentioned yet as well. So I'll give him the nod there. I jokingly said like he's arguably him and Hakeem are the top 2 offensive centers all time. I give Kareem the nod. The sky hook, we all hear about that. Most unstoppable move, but yada, yada, yada. He still had game on the block outside of the sky hook too. He still had the ability. And defensively, as I mentioned, he was really good defensively. I'm still not putting him as good as Hakeem defensively, but still was far from a slouch. And he was just a mismatch. In that era at 7'2" and the length he had, it was just ridiculous. As you mentioned earlier, too, he was dominant with 2 different names. He had 2 different Hall of Fame careers with different names. Both of them could be in the NBA Hall of Fame. So we have Kareem sitting at number 3.
Yeah, let's not forget Lou Alcindor. That name means something in Milwaukee. He was also responsible for the only championship in Milwaukee Bucks history up until Giannis. So
and Oscar Robertson, he did a little something too.
Okay, fair enough. I guess you can say Oscar.
This is
you
did
mention
Robertson.
He played. I forgot you mentioned he played. You mentioned he played with him there. So all right, fair enough. I'll give that credit.
Yes, like that was a Lou Alcindor driving force.
But yeah, that was there. So I definitely don't hate it. Obviously, I like Kareem. And as I said, I just don't think he's the best center. So I can't put the not best at that position ahead of others that I think are better than this position. And we're splitting hairs here. We're talking top 10 NBA players of all time. I'm sure the comment section is going to be rife with Kareem at 3, or mine is Kareem at 9. We already know it's going to happen. But that's okay. That's what we do this for, right?
That's what we're here for, the hate, basically. That's what we're here for.
All right. Well, speaking of hate, I don't know how I ever can say I didn't hate this guy when he played, at least. And that's Kobe Bryant, number 3 for me. He's my number 3, and the biggest reasons are, you mentioned his stats earlier. I don't think I need to repeat those for anybody who didn't listen. But you take both 8 and 24 Kobe, and you put them separately as a different person, and there's still a Hall of Fame career in both situations. And that's a wild thing to say. You had 2 different numbers retired by the team, and obviously posthumously those were retired, but it is still something that's said that no other player on this list can say they've had 2 careers that if you split them by number, that on the back, they're Hall of Fame careers. We just mentioned Kareem, 2 names could be considered a Hall of Fame career, which is crazy. But then at the same time, now you have 2 careers with a number on your back that are completely different, that are both retired by the one team you stayed with. Had it not been for that Achilles injury late in the year or late in his career, I think he finishes higher than 3rd at the time on the scoring list, now 4th on the scoring list. But he finished in 3rd on the scoring list ahead of MJ, and now he's been passed by somebody neither of us have mentioned that I know we're going to get to in LBJ. But that's something to be like, you don't just do that. And yes, volume scorer aside, all that Mamba mentality, I think, means more to anybody in more to the NBA today than I think more people know about Mamba mentality than they know about who the logo actually is in the NBA. And I think that is talk about the Lakers lore. Neither of us put Jerry West in this, if that tells you anything, and he's the logo for the entire association. And here we are talking about Kobe, where there are statues of this guy. There are awards named after him. Like, his play on the court was defined by Mamba mentality, and everybody strives to have that Mamba mentality in the NBA. People are now converting it into work life and having that Mamba mentality for getting things done. I know we're trying to keep it off from getting off the court, and it was because of his on-the-court focus of the Mamba mentality that made him so good. Something that nobody ever matched as far as in like closing situations. I don't think there's another player I'd want with the ball. And that's coming from a guy who literally watched his favorite team in the Kings get beat by this man every single year. And I haven't forgotten about 2002. It's still fresh in my mind every time I think about it. And I still cry at night when I think about it. But you know what? I'm giving the man his roses. He deserves it. He is one of the all-time greats. And again, revolutionizing sports type of conversation here with him. He is that guy that revolutionized what the modern NBA player could look like as far as the scoring and all the ways that he goes about it. And let's again not forget he was a defensive stalwart at times. When he wanted to lock somebody down, he could lock them down. Him and MJ got matched up as a young 19-year-old kid, and he still did his best to try to lock down the GOAT, potential GOAT. And yeah, it's very interesting just to see his whole career arc. And as for somebody who did not like him when he played,
Clearly, the internet is fighting.
I
He's like,
think I feel like, yeah, sorry, there. Well, I look at him with a little less rose-tinted glasses. I look at him as more of a neutral character, despite disliking him for so long. So I feel like it's a little bit more balanced when I'm putting him up here at 3 versus what I really want to do is like number 9. But I couldn't do that in my heart.
Hey, you know what? This is a Kobe Stan account too. There'll be no arguments there for sure. We're gonna stick with a more modern era here for number 2. We're gonna go with LBJ, the chosen one, 30,000 King James, whatever 3,000 names we have for him. We got LeBron James at number 2. 20-time All-Star, the most all-time, 4-time league MVP, 4-time finals MVP, multiple-time All-Star game MVP, 1-time scoring champ, rookie of the year, although that probably could have gone to Melo, 6-time all-defensive team, should have been defensive player of the year in 2013, not Marc Gasol, with all due respect to Marc Gasol. We look throughout his career too. The one thing that also stands out is he has been listed as playing 4 different positions throughout. Actually, he's listed at playing all 5 positions. Listed as a 2 guard his rookie year, small forward until he went to Miami, where they list him as a power forward for those couple of years. Then back to small forward, point guard those couple of years early on with the Lakers. One year they had him listed as center, which I think was like a point center goofy thing they were running for a year. Then small forward, power forward again. So has been listed as for a season as all 5 positions. Career averages still after 20 years at 27, 7, and 7, with 50% from the field, 35% from 3, 73% from the free throw line. Efficiency, 1-time scoring champion in 2007, 2008. Mention all the MVPs as well. Led the NBA in assists 1 time that first year playing point guard with the Lakers. Basically was a triple-double machine when he wanted to be. 1.5 steals per game, almost a block a game. 55% from the field. Honestly, if we were just doing simply like most well-rounded player, I feel like he gets the nod comfortably. His biggest weakness is arguably recently free throws. Like for some reason, I don't know what happened there. Those have just plummeted for the last few years. And then consistent 3-point range. But when it comes to driving to the basket, arguably the best at driving to the basket of all time. Most punishing, the hardest to deal with. When he was in Miami in the post, my goodness, good luck. Nobody wanted to match up with him. That was when we still had Tim Duncans in the league too. The epitome of versatile, 20 years, the poster boy of long-term high-level consistency. At this point, a lot of that Tom Brady in the NBA factor as well. Still averaging 23 points a game right now. The all-time leading scorer is going to be top 10 in assists as well. Might even get there in rebounds, depending. Like he's going to leave a massive footprint on the NBA when he is done. Like throughout the stat book, he's going to be all over the place. So we got LeBron James at number 2. Arguably could make the case as the best, most well-rounded player of all time. But for the greatest of all time, I'll save that for who I have at number 1. But we let LeBron James top 2 of all time can make a case for 1 or 2 either way.
I agree. He is top 2 of all time. He's not my number 2. Yeah, I'll save my commentary on LeBron for the next pick. But no, MJ is my number 2, and I know where the stats are going to go. But he is the best best player to have played in the NBA. But that's why I asked that question early on. There's a difference between the best NBA player and the best player to play in the NBA. And I think that's the difference here, where if I'm looking to build a team, I don't pick MJ. And I can go into the stats, but I know you're going into them next. So I'm going to let you have those moments to talk about it. with MJ for me, he's a player that I want to close out. I want to lock down, but he's not necessarily going to be the linchpin that gets everything going. He's not going to make everybody on that team all the way down to 15 on the bench better. And that's why MJ falls to 2. Because in the past, I do believe in the last time we did this, I had MJ at 1. Maybe I didn't, but I think we also included off court stuff, so maybe I didn't because of that. But just purely on the court, I love everything about MJ's career. I watched him dominate the Jazz many times in the finals, twice in the finals, and it's just he's one of the best players ever played. There's not a single doubt. It's hard with these conversations to like rationalize why I'm picking, as I said earlier, one of the GOATs of all time. Some people straight up GOAT as far as all sports across the board. He's not there for me, and this is me personally. And it's just down to the difference in how you define an NBA player versus a player in the NBA. And it's just one of those guys could do a lot more. I think MJ could have done a lot more on the court if he played under current rules or different rules. Part of it gets washed away because of the retirement midway in his career. I mean, yeah, it's incredible that you win 3 in a row, retire for 2 years, come back, win 3 more. That's a crazy stat. That's going to be never touched again. You went and played another sport, but it's the fact that on the court, like your team still won and went to the playoffs without you. Not necessarily the case for my number one. When he leaves a team, it's pretty much decimated when he leaves. And I think that's the telling part. Most valuable player for me is, I think that matters a little bit in where I'm cutting hairs here between 1 and 2. And so while MJ is one of the best players to have ever played the game, and if you're asking me who the best 2 guard is, I'm going to say MJ, 10 out of 10. Who I want to close out a game, it's going to be MJ or Kobe. Who do I want to score or go lock somebody down defensively? It's probably going to be MJ, but there is a conversation for LeBron. And so that's the difference here. For me, MJ is number 2. But yeah, I know where your number 1's going, unless you're about to say that Pete Havlicek is your number 1.
Like John Havlicek from back in those Celtics teams.
Yeah, sorry.
Russ on here. I'm just gonna pull the wool over everyone's eyes and just completely.
I combined Pistol Pete and John Havlicek.
But I'll keep mine quick and simple. Obviously, Michael's gonna be number 1 for me. His airness, MJ, Air Jordan, whatever you want to call him, 1,000 nicknames. When I came down to it, the 2 most important things when it comes to the game of basketball, if we broke it down to the literal epitome of nuts and bolts, is put ball in basket. Don't let other guy put ball in basket. When it comes to that, Jordan averaging 36 and 5, so 30 points per game in his career, led the NBA in scoring 10 different times as a scoring champion, 9-time all defensive, as well as far as keeping other guy from scoring the ball. Defensive player of the year. I'm not even going to go into the 6-0 6 finals MVP because that's exhausting. And I don't think that really that's obviously a deciding factor, but that's overplayed when that's the only argument. So we're just going to move past that because we already know that. 11-time all NBA, 14-time all star. One thing I want to give a nod to that as far as building the team around you mentioned, because I think sometimes you can lead by example in a way. And the fact that he played 82 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in those 14 years, one of which was with the Wizards when he was a decrepit old man who was completely jacked up on cigars and gambling. Just the ability to get out there and be available at every single given game stands out for me. Pretty much finished in the MVP race every single year of his career that he played. In fact, literally every single year except for that second year when he broke his leg or his ankle. Every other year he was in the MVP race in some way, shape, or form. In the top, he was in that conversation. 30 points per game for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 consecutive years, including 37 points per game in his third year in the NBA, which without the 3-point ball, just absolutely asinine because that is all dunks and mid-range and layups and getting headbutted by Bill Laimbeer when you go up for a shot. We talked about too. Just on top of the fact that there was a stretch there, I can't remember which season was in the early 90s, where he basically had to play point guard for him and averaged a triple-double for a month, showed the ability to expand that range. But when it comes to the very nuts and bolts of put ball in basket and stop other guy from putting ball in basket, for his stretch of 14 years, it's very hard for me to go against it. Then you throw in the championships, the accolades, and all that too. So we're gonna give it to Michael Jordan. I'm not gonna. This is not a put down LeBron to elevate MJ. This is a I elevate MJ because I think that is how absolutely outstanding he was. And I can only. I'm also not gonna say it's one of those where LeBron can't pass him per se because there's some people that no matter what you tell them, like, nope, can't pass it after 2011, not possible. After the Maverick series can't happen, or they just draw a line in the sand and it's an argument at the wall.
Yeah.
Won't put that there, but I do think there was something to what he did that transcends the stat books, like what we saw with, like we talked about with Kobe as well, which is weird how very similar their play styles and even breaking down their careers to a point could be. But we're going to put Michael at number one. And I want to mention too that 84% from the free throw line on top of it, that mid range, that was the original money from mid range before Sean Livingston, who never missed one. This Michael Jordan was the OG as far as like money from the mid range, to the point where every time he pulled up, it was like chalk it up, that's in. Just didn't even a two guard that was posting up the way he did from the elbow just was stupid at the time when you look back on it. When the paint was so congested, your two guard has no business posting up. Yet there he was just playing around in the post like he's Hakeem Olajuwon at times, and then pulling that fadeaway shot. So we're gonna put Michael at one. Give you a few moments here to talk about why you have LeBron at one, unless you're gonna pull the wool over our head as well. But I think you kind of did allude to it already.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna fool anybody with this one. You mentioned the nuts and bolts of basketball, and I agree. It's very simple: score, stop the other team scoring.
If only it was really that simple, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If that's it, we're boiling it down to the essence of it. That's the essence. This man, LeBron, leads all other scorers in the NBA all time by more than 3,000 points right now. He knows how to put the ball in the basket, and he does so in a way that's not bulk like Kobe, or not hogging the ball like some claimed MJ did in certain periods. You mentioned his triple double stretch, and I disagree with the theory that he was hogging the ball because there was nobody for him to pass to. But it's something that came with it. LeBron has always had the complaint attached to him that he overpasses, whether it be a crucial situation or just in the middle of the game, that he's an overpasser. And the simple answer is, well, he makes the right play. When I say I want to build a team around somebody, I want to build a team around somebody that's going to make the right play every time. Because if we go one step up from the very two basics, the next step up is making the right play, making the right decisions in a quick, short amount of time. And LeBron has shown throughout his career that that's exactly what he does. Does his player that he passes the ball to ever always hit the shot? No, that's not the case. But
George Hill.
He knows his skills. And unlike I mentioned earlier, some players that know their skills, he also knows everybody on the court with him skills. And he knows where they're going to be. And that's like, there's another level to it where, as far as basketball goes, that vision, that IQ that goes with it. I'm not saying MJ didn't have those things. I'm just saying they were developed in a different direction. MJ's was focused on the kill shot. LeBron was focused on the overarching, we're going to be better. It's like the tide rises, as the tide rises, all boats are lifted. That type of conversation. LeBron is the tide. He's rising all boats in there. And then MJ comes in like a tidal wave, wipes out anything that gets in his way. And then you follow along or you get off the ship. Like, that's the difference in the two. And there's nothing wrong with either approach. They both are successful. They both win. Just, to me, I think impact on the court wise, when I look at the two, it's just, I'm looking at the full breadth of it a little differently, where I think the plays matter in my mind, of just playing and making the right plays, because that's something, if I'm teaching a kid how to play, I'm going to point to LeBron first instead of pointing to MJ. And the reason why is because if I want a good teammate, I'm going to point to LeBron. I'm not going to point to the guy that literally punched his own teammates in the face multiple times. And, and I know that's a competitiveness, and trust me, I get it. I've wanted to punch my own teammates in the face many a times. I do think I slapped a few kids in the face before, but we had helmets on, so I wasn't going to punch them. It's just, I think the difference is the way they approach it, from a mentality where it very much is MJ's a killer mentality. It's like, it's kill or be killed. LeBron, it's like, why would I do the hard thing when I could do the easy thing and we win still? For more often than not, that's the theory. So that's where I go with getting LeBron at number one. We know all the stats. I don't think anybody has to repeat those over and over again. I know I love stats as much as everybody else, but when we're talking about the top 2 players of all time, it's hard to compare them anyways. And then add into that, now we're gonna have to split hairs by only going on the court, where they both have impact beyond the court as well, and equally impactful, both of them in their own rights. So on the court wise, it's just down to how do I want to watch the game, and I would rather watch a LeBron carried team more than a MJ carried team because I think it gets more people involved. And again, you can say what you will about players who they played with. You mentioned the time stretch where MJ was averaging a triple double. There wasn't really anybody on that team until they got Scotty to really back him up. But after they got Scotty, that team was full of all stars. LeBron, up until he joined the Heatles, that was the first time he ever played with anybody that was really in their prime. Unless you could say Darnell Marshall was a guy in his prime, or Eric Snow was a guy in his prime, or J.R. Smith when his second return to the Cavs was in his prime, or Dwayne Wade with the Cavs was in his prime. Like those, the Heatles was the peak of where he got to play with players, and we saw how good he could be around superstar players. And I think that just shows how good he was around bad players. And that's why I thought LeBron made a better NBA player than MJ as a player in the NBA. And again, I'm splitting hairs here, loosely using the definitions around players in the NBA versus NBA players. But yeah, that's what I have to do to kind of justify either decision. So I got LeBron number 1, while you go MJ with number 1. So yeah.
Well, say if I'm teaching somebody how to play basketball, I'm not going to use either of those. I'm going to show them Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. See, when you see somebody who can move without the basketball, who doesn't need to think different ways to win, that I'm teaching someone who can score 60 on 9 dribbles. Or somebody like Steph, who's the point guard, and then that's where I'm going to go.
Or Tim Duncan. I mean, like those are like, yeah, I agree. Like
depending on their size breakout, yes. If they're 6'11", we're not going to teach them how to play like Klay.
No, exactly. I just think that's kind of when I say that, it's just down to like, if I'm me personally, like what am I looking for as the best ever player in the NBA? That's really what it comes down to for me. Is like, it's just like Aaron Donald in the NFL when we've talked about that. I don't think Aaron Donald, while he's a fantastic defensive lineman, I don't think he's the best all time, despite all the accolades that went with him, just because he doesn't have teachable tape. Like there's not tape that you can teach a kid how to play like that. You can't teach people to be like MJ. MJ is MJ for a reason. Just like I say the same thing about Kobe. You can't teach people to be like Kobe because that mentality is not something you can teach. That's something that is brought to you. It's something LeBron doesn't have. But I think that's why I lean towards LeBron a little more, is because he doesn't have that Mamba mentality, that killer mentality like MJ. He instead has a whole all-encompassing mentality where it's like, I want everybody to succeed on this team because together we will win versus the first 6.
If you try and emulate Kobe or MJ and you don't have that extra factor, you end up like Jason Tatum or Devin Booker, who are outstanding players, but it's just not quite there yet. So one thing that like I mentioned earlier, I've read the comments, I've read the DMs where they hate our list because they're either too similar or we don't fight enough necessarily from. There's not enough discourse. Where I think of the top 10, we had like 8 that were the same, give or take. So what we did is we outsourced the chance to get another list to compare ours to for a top 10. And this one, we'll see. You guys can yell at all 3 of us now. So this is the list I outsourced for us as well. Starting from the bottom top, number 10, we got Dr. J. Number 9, The Answer, Allen Iverson, not artificial intelligence. Number 8, we got Kevin Durant. 7, the Chef Steph Curry. 6, Magic Johnson. At 5, Kareem. At 4, Kobe Bryant. At 3, Michael Jordan. At 2, the Big Diesel Shaq. And at number 1, LeBron James. So this is an outreach list that we have to compare to ours as well. So anyone that's listening, if you hate us doing our list, there's one to compare to as well. We got a bunch of different ways. I do like seeing Dr. J get some love. I think he does get a little slept on. They think he's just a dunker when he was actually an outstanding player. So glad to see him get a shout out, even if neither one of us was the ones to do it necessarily. But this is what we had for everyone for our Christmas episode, breaking down our top 10 NBA players of all time. A little variation over the years. And you know what? Give it 2 years, we might have a different list again. So there's some guys in that 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-ish range that are still playing actively. There's a few guys I left off those lists. I'm like, do I really want them off the list? And
I left Steph off for that. Like, I left Steph off because I'm like, I don't know where to put him right now. Like, I couldn't figure out where I wanted to put him in the top 10. So it was just easier to leave him off. And I know it's coming for me. You put Steph on your list. I didn't. And I know I got the heat coming for Steph, but like, there's also Giannis, there's KD, there's
Jokic.
there's Jokic, there's potentially Embiid if he could ever figure out getting healthy. I don't know if
Chris
that's ever
Paul.
going to happen though.
I don't think Chris Paul is going to quite get there, but there's guys that are in that conversation. Luka, if he continues on this trajectory, like that's more of a long ways to go
Then
compared to the KD
there's the question about Kyrie.
and
Does
Kawhi.
he? Yeah. Did they do enough to get here, or are they still on that fringe as kind of the number 2 option in this top 10 round? Like, yeah, there's so many options. It changes every year. I know 4 years ago I did have Steph in there. I obviously dropped him out because I just couldn't figure out where to put him.
Which is ironic because he has done more since then, but it's just the way it played out.
I think I was like, I want to put him at 5th, but I'm like, I can't put him ahead of Duncan. That's not happening. But then I don't want to put him at 6th because then that feels offensive to everybody else. Like, okay, hold on, where am I going here?
No matter what you do, there's always going to be at least 5 players that deserved it. But everyone, go ahead and let us know down in the comments below what your top 10 is, which one of our lists, or if you like the reference list a little bit better that we outsourced as well. Let us know which one you like the best and what your top 10 list is. Hopefully, you'll have a very happy holiday season. Spend some time with your family, loved ones, your pets, your friends, everything like that. Stay safe, of course. Stay warm, and we will see you all again next year.
Yeah, happy 2025, guys.